have a very exciting workshop today. Leading today's workshop, we'd like to welcome Taylor MacLean, the creative lead at the Center for Communicating Knowledge here at TMU. Throughout her career, Taylor has sought out positions where she can make ideas, concepts, and information more accessible. She believes in clarity, simplicity, and strong storytelling. No matter what the project, Taylor's goal is to craft narratives that are compelling, universal, and accessible, and strives to help the TMU community tell powerful research stories. Taylor's also been crucial for our website. If you've been to the website, that's all thanks to Taylor, and she's been helping us craft our messages. So we have a workshop today to help everybody who's doing research now learn to craft messages better and to help share the information that we're learning through SingWell with people who need it, the knowledge mobilization piece. So thanks so much, Taylor, for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you all for joining me. So I'll tell you a little bit more about the Center for Communicating Knowledge, CCK. We are a part of Toronto Metropolitan University, TMU, and we work with research teams across the university to help them find ways of communicating their research. Oftentimes that's communicating research to non-experts. So finding ways of really engaging people, of taking information and actually making it something that people want to learn about, can use, want to engage with. So that's sort of the mandate of CCK. In the past, we've worked on a wide range of projects. So we've designed exhibits, we've built websites, produced short films, but really underlying everything is an approach that's media and design based, which is a little bit unique within a university setting. I really try to push research teams further in what they consider to be knowledge mobilization, because I think sometimes it's very narrowly defined. A lot of times there's sort of a more traditional approach to things that might involve plain language summaries or project websites. But there's really a wide world of exciting approaches to knowledge mobilization that I see, and not all of it is within a research or university context. There are many organizations or groups that are engaging in some sort of knowledge sharing with someone who can benefit from that information, even if they don't necessarily realize that that's what they're doing, or if they call it knowledge mobilization. So I kind of cast a wide net in terms of where I take inspiration from, but I also cast a wide net in terms of what activities count as knowledge mobilization. So when I'm talking about this kind of work, I'm really talking about any kind of project that involves sharing information with someone who can use and benefit from that information. So today, I want to walk you through kind of the planning process that I take when I'm approaching new projects. And I'm going to illustrate each of these steps using one case study, which is a website project that I've been working on for the past few years. And I'm going to share my screen and I'll quickly show you this website. There we go. So this is a website that I've been working on with the School of Nursing here at TMU. And the website is called BPGs in Action. So it is meant to introduce nursing students to the best practice guidelines, which are a series of publications that have been created by the Registered Nurses Association of Ontario. And these publications provide an evidence-based, a series of evidence-based recommendations for various types of nursing care. And the RNAO over the past few years has really been trying to increase uptake of these best practice guidelines, particularly within nursing programs and with students. I'll just go to the guidelines section. And they've had difficulty with getting students to kind of, use these, use the actual best practice guidelines. So this nursing team did research into why exactly students weren't using it, and some of the challenges and barriers that were preventing them from engaging with these best practice guidelines. So I will also put this link in the chat so you can kind of have a look at the website as well. There we go. Okay, so the team had done research into what was preventing students from accessing these guidelines, and then they were given a grant from the RNAO to develop an intervention that would kind of help with that uptake. So I'll be referring back to this website. We'll talk about it in more detail throughout the presentation. But let's get back to knowledge mobilization. So I will now share different screen. Let's see if we can get this to full screen. Okay, all right. I can't do it without it taking over my entire screen. So it'll have to be this little small window. Okay, so a lot of initial approaches that I see when I'm kind of meeting with research teams for the first time is I call it the menu approach to knowledge mobilization planning, which is that people kind of think about what they want to create before they have really defined who they're communicating with, what they're actually communicating, and why exactly they feel that they need to communicate this. So why is it valuable? And the answers to these kinds of questions, what are you communicating, who are you communicating with, and why is your information valuable? To me, this is the foundation of everything. It's also deceptively simple. It's really easy to look at these questions and think, yeah, I know the answer to this. But I compare it to when you use a word regularly and then you're asked to define it and you can't really do it. And you sort of realize, maybe I don't understand that as much as I thought I did. So I think the process of really specifically and clearly articulating some of these things really highlights where some of the foundations of whatever project you're working on might be a little bit vague. And to use the example of the BPG's In Action website, this menu approach is that when the team originally came to me, they wanted to build an app. And they had been given there was some external pressure that, oh, an app would be great. But they hadn't really considered why. Like, why does an app serve our purpose more than a website would? And really, it was just that it sounded cool. It sounded impressive to build an app. But there wasn't a lot of consideration into how does this serve the people that we're trying to connect with? How does it serve our goals within this project? So that's sort of an example using the BPG's In Action website. Instead of taking that menu approach, I really encourage everyone to start with defining the audience and defining the purpose. Again, it seems really simple, but it's really important to go through the process of articulating all of that. The phrase that I hear a lot, and I think is really great, is that knowledge mobilization is about putting research into action. There's all kinds of terms used to talk about research communication. There's knowledge translation, knowledge dissemination. But knowledge mobilization really is trying to capture that not only do we want to get the information out, we want people to be able to use it. So I highlight that because this sort of action is an important piece when you're defining purpose. You want to think about what is the reason for sharing that information and what do you want people to do with that information? What actions do you want your audience to take? How do you envision them actually using this knowledge? Depending on the complexity of your project, you might have multiple of your overall research project, you might have multiple knowledge mobilization initiatives. And each of those might have a different purpose and they might have a different audience. And because of this, it's really important to be specific. You don't want to assume that the information that you have is useful. It's easy to kind of start from that place because you know why it's useful to you. You want to write out specifically, why is it useful to the people that I need to connect with? It's really important to start from that place of it may not be the same as why it's useful to me. And it's really easy to substitute your own needs for your audience or whoever you're trying to reach, to substitute your needs for theirs and to lose sight of that. Defining this audience and purpose, they go together, and sometimes you kind of have to go back and forth between the two and sort of, massage each as you're kind of working through this problem. And the whole time you're really trying to think about, how do I match my purpose and my audience to the larger research project? So I'll start just with purpose, even though they do kind of go together. It's not necessarily a sequential step, but I like to break purpose into 3 different parts. The first is defining the overall goal. What is it that you're trying to achieve? The next is to kind of break that goal into specific actions. So what actions can the audience, the people I'm trying to reach, what actions can they take that will help us achieve this overall goal? Again, really trying to keep things active. And then you want to think about the value and the benefit. So what is the benefit of my audience or the user taking this action? How does it help them? How does it help others? And what is the benefit of them taking these actions to the overall goal? I think, I'll emphasize this a lot throughout, but the answers may seem really simple, and it's important to, I think, write them down and articulate them, and to be as specific as you can. Alongside breaking down your purpose is to think about your audience, who you're trying to reach. There are different types of audiences that you might be trying to reach. Here's kind of a brief list, not exhaustive by any means, but you might be trying to reach other experts, academics. It might be communities of practice. It could be a particular group or community itself that may be non-experts and have, absolutely no understanding of the information that you're trying to communicate. It could also be policymakers or government, people who might have influence within the policy related to whatever research you're doing. Just some examples of the kinds of people that you're trying to reach. You can have more than one target audience, but you really need to be careful with this because you want to maintain specificity, and you also want to make sure that you're not trying to reach too many people at once. So I think it's important to create a hierarchy. This is a common practice within strategic communications, to break down your audience into groups. You have your primary, the main people that you want to target. Secondary, so this is, less of a priority, but still people that you think are going to be important. And then tertiary. So for me, the tertiary audience is usually not people that I want to target specifically, but that might be able to connect me with my primary or secondary audiences. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. This is what I've heard before. I've heard it more than once. When asked about purpose and audience, my purpose is to raise awareness, and my audience is all Canadians. This is so broad that it's not helpful in any way. It doesn't give you a really solid foundation to figure out where to go from here. If I contrast it with the BPGs in Action website, thankfully that team, when they first came to me, they had a very specific audience and purpose already defined. They'd done research on nursing students and their use of these best practice guidelines. So they found that most students knew about them, but didn't find them useful. And after learning this, they explored the challenges and barriers that prevented students from using them. The number one issue that they found was that students felt that the information was just far too dense. So the BPG documents themselves are hundreds of pages long. Not everything in those documents is relevant to students. And this was a big barrier. The other big barrier they found was that students were kind of confused as to how to use these guidelines. They didn't know if it was, rules that had to be followed strictly. Were they things that you had to tackle in order? They were so confused as to what role this should play within their nursing practice. So from all of this information, the team was able to really clearly define all of this for me. So their overall goal: increase the number of students who are using the BPGs as a resource during their clinical placement in the final year of their project or their program. A very specific thing, and something that is measurable to a certain degree. The specific action, what they wanted their students to do, they wanted them to review the best practice guidelines before and after their shifts. They wanted to refer to it when they had questions about different approaches to care. And they wanted students to use it as a tool when they're engaging in reflective exercises in their programs. So they actually could envision how students were going to specifically use this information. They had a strong visual. This is what we want them to do. This is how we see them using it. Incredibly practical. And in terms of value, having students learn the BPGs will improve their knowledge and skills, help them develop better approaches to care, and ultimately, because these are evidence-based, they're going to increase or improve patient outcomes. If you compare something like this to my goal is to raise awareness, or the purpose is to raise awareness, you can see how much more useful and instructive this is. If I have a foundation like this, it's a lot easier to figure out where to go next and to start planning other interventions. Now, in terms of their audience, obviously their primary audience, that's easy. They're specifically targeting nursing students at TMU. But they also recognized that there was potential for this website to be useful for practicing nurses outside the university and also other healthcare practitioners, like personal support workers. So those weren't the specific targets, but we wanted to keep those groups in mind as we were creating some of these resources. For the tertiary audience, we increased the use of the BPGs within curriculum itself. So ultimately, we're trying to reach students, but the way that we get to students is through faculty and instructors. So this was another important an important audience. We're not designing the website for faculty instructors, but we know that within all of our knowledge mobilization activities, at some point we need to consider faculty and instructors, and we'll need to connect with them because they're going to be an important conduit to to the students themselves. That leads me into the next section, which is about mapping and finding pathways in order to connect with your target audience. This is a complex and really tricky step. And it's something that is ongoing throughout your project. You will likely always be trying to reach people and looking for new ways to do it. More often than not, you don't have a large, already established audience that you're connected and engaged with. It's difficult when you don't have that to know where to start. Social media can be effective. I think that's a lot of people's first instinct and the sort of go-to, well, we'll start a social media account. And it can be effective, but if you're just thinking about it as starting the social media account and pushing out content and then waiting for people to find it, it's not going to work. It can take years to establish a following on social media that's large enough to make an impact. And it also requires a significant amount of time each week. You need to engage with your followers. You need to map out networks and find new people to follow and new people to engage with. You need to find content and develop content to post that's going to be interesting and engaging for people, that people are going to want to like or repost in some way. And so if you're just kind of casually logging on and posting infrequently, it's pointless. It's pointless. It doesn't mean that social media isn't an effective tool. It's just really important to begin with the understanding that it's going to take considerable effort and time. And so I really take a considered approach with social media. I like to think hard with any project as to whether it's going to be effective, whether it's a good use of time and resources, and whether we have the situation or the resources to be able to do it well. And more often than not, I start with a grassroots approach, which is talking to people and digging around to figure out contacts and what are the different ways that I can reach and we can reach our target audiences. Social media can be a great place to start with these things as a research tool. You can find communities within your area. You can identify influencers, which I'm not talking about kind of the stereotypical picture that comes to mind when we think of influencers, really just people who have a strong and engaged following. And that exists in all of the different pockets and niches within social media platforms. So I really encourage you when you're starting out these projects to start by having conversations about what you're trying to do, asking people questions, trying to figure out how you might connect with a particular community. And this, I think, is an important foundation, is to think of any kind of knowledge mobilization, outreach as person-to-person relationships rather than broadcasting messages. So often we think of it that way. We've got to push this information out. We've got to broadcast these messages. But it's really about building relationships. And the only way that we can do that is to start having conversations. If we want to use social media, that's great. But we have to have conversations on social media rather than just posting, broadcasting. It's also about kind of that listening. That conversation approach, listening and learning about your audience, it's important to do that as much as you're sharing information with them. you may get to the point where you have a large and successful knowledge mobilization project. You have the attention of thousands of people, and the work that you're doing isn't on an interpersonal level. You have a larger platform to share that information. But even still, that the things that you're sharing, the messages, the content, those still need to be thought of as personal. Everything that you do should still be dictated by a deep understanding and also an empathy for the people that you are trying to share information with. It should feel personal, even if you don't have contact with every single person. Which brings us to another part of the planning process, which is about learning about your audience and empathizing with them. I kind of put it within the mapping out of pathways process, because mapping the pathways requires that you learn more and more about your audience. And as you learn more about your audience, you start to find more pathways. So again, it's kind of this back and forth sort of approach. And I use the term empathy because that's something that we talk a lot about in design, in all fields of design. It's the first step within the design thinking process, is to empathize with whatever your end user, your audience, whatever their needs and challenges are. So they have to remain at the center of everything. If we think about that menu approach and you start with the idea of, I'm going to create an app or I'm going to make a website, the user is not the place that you've started with. They're not the center of this. The product that you're trying to make is the center, and it needs to be flipped around. So in terms of network mapping and empathizing, if I use again, the BPGs in Action website, what did this look like with that project? Well, I started the project by having meetings and consultations with students themselves. I wanted to get their thoughts and hear about their experiences using these guidelines. And because I'm not one of their instructors and I'm outside of the nursing profession, I was able to create a space where they could be candid and share even, negative and positive ideas. And these conversations formed the foundation of the website. Every single design decision that we made was based on what they shared with us. I asked them about the nature of their placements in their final years. What kinds of things were they asked to do? Were they, during their shift, were they quizzed by their supervisors? What did their day look like? Did they look things up on their phone during the day? That was a big question that I wanted to know. Are you allowed to have your phone when you're, on the floor of a hospital? And do you look up, do you look things up? And the answer was yes, which I was sort of surprised about. Having that, really specific information about exactly what their day looks like, it expands your ideas of what they need so much. And there were so many things that we could do with this website that would have looked good to the research community, to TMU, to the funders, but that would be absolutely useless to the students. So if we start from this place of, I'm thinking about this student, they're on this website, they're mid-shift in their placement, what do they need from me? It changes everything. The other part, so that's kind of the empathizing part. The other pathway related thing is about what I was talking about earlier, which is the conduits. So that tertiary audience that I identified as faculty members and instructors. So we see them as, a necessary step in reaching students. And we're still in the process of promoting the website and really, disseminating it. So we haven't reached out to instructors yet, but our plan is to connect with them to see if they might include this within their curriculum. And, we hope to kind of provide some sample assignments or some lesson plans that might help them do that. And we've also offered to, come into classes and tell them about the website, or tell students about the website and explain, how it might be useful. So the website itself, again, is not designed for faculty instructors, but a side project is kind of figuring out, how do we connect with them and what do they need from us? How can we make their lives easier so that they will, use this within their classes? So I've talked about kind of the strategic parts of this, defining your purpose for engaging in the project itself, figuring out who are you trying to reach, who should this audience be, understanding and empathizing with your audience, and then, the pathways to reaching them. Now I want to kind of shift focus to the knowledge mobilization products themselves. And I tend to refer to all of this with the term content, and I've probably used this in the presentation already. To a lot of people, it's completely meaningless. Within communications and marketing, it's a term that's used all the time. And I use it as a catch-all term for any of the materials that are created within knowledge mobilization. It could be a physical thing, or it also could be experiential, like an event, an exhibit. So it's really, to me, a big catch-all term. Why I like using it is that it comes from marketing, and specifically content marketing, which I'm sure you've heard of, but I'll give kind of a quick overview and why I think it's an important concept. Content marketing begins from the idea that you can't just promote your company. You also have to provide value. So prior to the trend of content marketing, the value was thought just to be the product itself. But as we got more and more advertising and there's more and more noise, marketers realized that consumers, it was harder and harder to get their attention. And what they needed to do was to build brand loyalty and start giving consumers things that they valued, rather than just pushing out that promotional message. They started to create content that has absolutely nothing to do with promotion and is really only tangentially related to their product or company. An example of this is MailChimp. So they are an e-newsletter platform. You can create e-newsletters and send them out with their platform. If you go on their Twitter and see what they post a lot about, our product is great, but they also post things like they have a podcast and they interviewed Bjork the other day. Nothing related to e-newsletters, but they know that in order to have an audience, and to keep them engaged, they need to produce things that an audience will find interesting. Because if they just keep selling over and over again, our product is great, no one will follow them. No one will, be there when they want to sell something or promote something. The general rule of thumb, they say, is 80-20. So 80% of your content should be something that your followers, users will find useful, and then 20% of it can be promotional. So many examples of content marketing, some great, some not so great, but really it's all beginning from a place of you have to give to get. It may be commercial and capitalistic to kind of connect this to, sharing knowledge and research, but to me, it's a really important concept to keep in mind, especially because we often begin from a place when we're communicating research of this is good, this is valuable, and people need it. And all of those things may be true, but we still have to package it in a way that we show our audience those things. They have to know that those things are true. It's not enough to just kind of believe it ourselves. And I think that brings me kind of to my next point. which is that you have to provide value, not just in the information or knowledge itself, but also in how it's presented and how you promote it. So again, you're not just, you do have to provide valuable information, yes, but you also have to provide it in ways that make it valuable. To go back to the BPG example, if we look at the best practice guidelines themselves, so the original version that they come in are a long 100-page PDF document filled with extremely valuable information, but not presented in a way that allows students to access that information. So as a team, we needed to figure out, how do we provide value to our audience by changing the way the information was presented? So in the case of this website, the main way we did this was to make browsing and searching for these documents a lot easier, and to include brief summaries of each of the BPG documents. We also, so that's in kind of the providing value in how we're presenting the information. Information itself, valuable. How we present it also has to be valuable. Now we need to figure out, how do we get this out there? How do we promote it? In our promotion, also needs to provide value. So as I talked about earlier with the conduits, if I want someone to spread the word, promote my project, I have to figure out what I can do for them, what's in it for them. So with the faculty and instructors, one way that we can provide value for them is to create sort of a lesson plan or activities or assignments that they can use within their courses. So we're asking them to promote the website to students, but in return, we're giving them a teaching resource. So maybe it seems sort of transactional to think of things in this way, but I like to kind of instead think of it more from a reciprocity standpoint. Okay, so finally we're at the content for this slide. Good content. Kind of related to this providing value for me is defining what is good content. Big, scary question, vague, difficult to do, but to me, it's something that's really overlooked when engaging in these products and creating knowledge mobilization products themselves. It's about taking everything that you've learned about your audience and translating that into a skillful execution of whatever the materials or content that you're making. To me, my kind of high-level definition is useful, accessible, and entertaining. The entertaining part may sound superficial, but to me, I think it's really important. When we're entertained, we're attentive. And so often with knowledge mobilization, what we're communicating is so dry that we need to look for ways to make it entertaining. The specifics then of what makes something useful, accessible, or entertaining will depend again on the context of your actual project. With the BPGs in Action website, what we knew about the students, we used that to define what was going to be considered good content. So to make the site useful, we knew we needed to create really brief content that was easy to absorb. And we did that by condensing those BPG documents into brief summaries, which were presented point form notes. Again, that's not a complex thing to do, but it's something that really makes a huge difference. To make the site accessible, we created really clean layouts so that we're not overwhelming the user with information. We also organized all of the information on the page into different sections, clearly delineated sections. We used accordion menus to kind of contain some of the content. So again, it's not so overwhelming. You don't see this big mass of dense text. We also used sidebars to kind of create a framework, show a user right away, here's what you're going to find on this page, here's how much information there is, and an easy way to skip between the sections. Finally, for entertaining, we wanted to create a really, visually exciting design. So we used bright colors, vibrant graphics, to make sure that it didn't feel sort of like a stuffy organizational site. And then we also added in kind of personal and relatable content. So interviews with practicing nurses or graduating students, so that students can learn from people that they can relate to. So that's kind of how, that's how we defined good content in that project. It's going to change depending on the project that you're doing, but I think the best way is to start with useful, accessible, entertaining. Okay, so I'm nearing the end. I wanted to just quickly share just a couple of examples of things that I've really liked and found inspirational. Some of these are knowledge mobilization. Some of them are kind of only sort of defined that way. The first is a recruitment page for the Master's in Branding program at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. And it's this interactive poster where you can enter in different text up here. You can change the size of the text down here. You can offset it. You can play around with color. And then at the end, you can actually save your PDF. It's a recruitment tool primarily, so not, not knowledge mobilization proper, but I kind of consider it adjacent because it's allowing users to explore and experiment with typography, layout design, color theory. So it's really an introduction to some of the principles that they're actually covering within that program. And it's a really cool way, I think, to connect with your audience. The next one is, why don't I have this? An Instagram account called Subpar Parks. Yeah, not a knowledge mobilization project, but it is I believe that this person is a graphic designer, and they take negative Google reviews of national parks in North America and couple them with original artwork, and they're so funny and so entertaining. And it's not specifically a knowledge mobilization site, but I can see how this could be used in that way. So it could be used as potentially a campaign for greater awareness around different environmental issues related to some of these sites. But ultimately, it's an entertaining website. Or an entertaining Instagram account. I like to kind of include this example because for me, it's showing you a different model for engaging with social media. It's not based on a persona or an organization. It's based around an idea. And primarily the purpose is to entertain people, to make them laugh. And then along the way, they're also learning a little bit more about some of these parks. The final one, I'll put this link in so you can watch this video, is Freestyle Social. So a colleague of mine, Anthony Morgan, he runs this event called Freestyle Socials. And it's related to his research where he looks into the conditions for creating kind of productive dialogue around science issues. So really encouraging people to be curious rather than taking kind of hard stance and having kind of these combative discussions that might be sort of have this kind of, suspicious undertone. So he has these events, usually holds them in bars, or he did pre-COVID, but I think he did a lot online during COVID. And participants would come and they'd be given a question, science related, but something kind of sort of fun. The example he always used in talking about it to me is it okay to pee in the shower? And so participants kind of have like an informal debate about this. And there's also experts there that kind of can provide some information. For example, an expert that talks about the water savings benefits of peeing in the shower. And the main rule that they have for this is you need to switch sides at least once during the debate. So it's really about a kind of a fun event, and but encouraging people to be more curious and use debate as a way to learn rather than to, make you further kind of rigid, I guess, in the way that you're thinking and feeling about these things. So that brings me to the end. I do have one, I'll share this, I'll get Catherine to share this, or Arla to share. I have like a kind of infographic worksheet that sort of goes through what I've talked to you about, and has a little bit, some useful resources, and then also brainstorming / spark questions to kind of help you define some of these things more clearly, to start thinking about these things, and hopefully, build your way to a really specific and actionable plan when it comes to knowledge mobilization. So we will share that with you afterwards. And that brings me to the end.
Much, Taylor. I'm just reminded of when we first started chatting about the SingWell Project, how I did all of the wrong things. We want everybody to be our target audience. It's the communities, it's the practitioners, it's decision makers, it's academics. And Taylor's done a good job of training that in and helping me be more specific with different outputs of the project and who we're targeting those outputs to. So yeah, this was great. Thank you so much, Taylor. We have a few minutes if anyone has any questions.
Arla, I'll just comment on what you just said, which is that you had a lot of audiences, but you knew who they all were. And so it's just about in this case, it's about teasing apart and saying, okay, so we're doing this project, we're creating this website page. Who exactly are we doing that for? So I think with this project in particular, you have always been so clear on so many of these questions. So don't sell yourself short, is what I'm saying.
I think it's just been so helpful having this conversation to feel more clear about it. And the purpose of this workshop is that we can all be a little bit more clear. When we reviewed the proposals, the knowledge mobilization, we'll distribute the information. So the idea to be a bit more strategic about how we're doing that and who we're doing that for and why we're doing that. And I think Taylor really helps me understand that. Hopefully it was helpful for everyone here. Cool.
How are people feeling about knowledge mobilization? Are they feeling that it's out of their element? It's something they want to embrace? I don't know. Is it? It's a profession. Yeah. 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 No, that's a good point. Yeah, but I guess we're.
That's fine.
Yeah. 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 Well, it only became a really important thing in the granting world. Not that that's the only reason we should do it, but it only became an important thing in like the last decade or so.
It's also like it is something that's important to grant, but like within the university, it's not spelled within the like promotion structure.
No, not
So
at
then
all.
you like
Well,
have to, like get the time out of the user, unless you're able to
Right.
get the money out to grant things from the other. So it's sort of like
yeah,
it's a bit of a challenge that like we just don't have the whole resources to do this problem.
yeah. It's hard to know what the university values in terms of promotion these days. It's really a moving target. That's my opinion. It's really moving. Yeah. Like it's, it was clear it was productivity, good work, and like things have changed dramatically. It's and that's not a value judgment. It's just it's hard to know what we all value. I think it's changing from year to year.
I was just going to say, I totally agree with Isabel in the sense that I feel like it's a whole area of expertise that I don't have and that other people do. But just thinking about COVID-19, and I listened to Taylor and I think, I hope you talked to somebody or somebody consulted you. And when you think about the successes and the failures of knowledge mobilization for vaccination and everything with COVID-19, like then, and you think that that's about telling the stories that science has to tell, it actually means it is really important what we do, and to, the results of our work and what we want to convey about that.
And some people had it. We must admit, some people really have talent.
Right.
Well, or else they get the input and the help.
Yeah.
No, like you think it's,
No,
an,
no,
I mean, I
no.
think it's an innate talent, sort of.
No, but some people
But-
do have it.
Yeah, we need popularizers
Yeah.
and I think both of you have valid points that those of us that don't have those innate skills can develop them and lend help from folks like Taylor. Alex.
A very important workshop, and thanks for meeting it today. And I actually came back from the Canadian Association of Gerontology conference, and the entire theme was knowledge mobilization. There was some work to see, uptake of knowledge, mobilization of knowledge of older adults, and they were looking at the different platforms, so Facebook versus Twitter. Twitter apparently didn't do a very good job.
Makes sense.
Facebook was very useful. Instagram was not successful. So it really is about knowing your target and who's your target audience and where are they going? Where are they choosing to seek information? Right. So that's really also CIHR has some few workshops going on right now for knowledge mobilization. And it takes a very, very simple Taylor presented. It takes you through like understanding who is your audience. Your audience is not homogenous. You have different.
Are they like online fixed resources or?
They're online. It's a 3-day conference.
Oh, so they're actual, it's an actual event.
It's an
Okay.
actual event.
Yeah.
They've all been free. Yeah, I don't know. CIHR sent out an email.
It seems that these ideas that you were speaking about could be very useful for recruiting participants in their studies. Because I know even the non-singing studies, but trying to get older people to participate, and all you give them is a link to consent form,
Right.
you're dead. I mean, that's the end. But if we take the time to have videos of ourselves or show the lab or whatever. I attended a symposium on recruiting and developmental psychology that was at CPA. And the hoops they go through to get parental consent and use some of these techniques, thinking, what does the parent want to know? They want to see the scene.
And I mean, Sandra may have a lot of experience, but I remember working many years with you, and you would go to every hospital, and but now you can bring them into your lab in this way. So I think we have some work to do, but it's not all of it is outside of our grasp. But just thinking that yes, we have to show what's going to happen in the experiment, like actually show somebody carrying out your study and what is involved in it. And some people may already be doing that, but you know, I'm not doing that, and I want to do that as means of gathering. So this is very useful.
Yeah, I like that you say, when you say it's not out of our grasp, because I know like a lot of this stuff, or there's a lot that is very specialized. There's lots that I do that requires very specialized knowledge and design skills in order to execute. But I think from the foundation that I think everyone can have is a foundation of paying attention and slowing down to think through a process. I think we so easily kind of disconnect when we're dealing, at least for me, when I'm dealing with something that's sort of, here's my professional brain and here's my professional world, and I'm trying to achieve something over here in my professional world, I completely disconnect it from my personal world. And when I bring together the, you know, Twitter feed that I consistently, like the followers that I consistently go back to just because I enjoy, has nothing to do with anything that I do at work. It's just something I enjoy. When I can connect that to my work, that's when things start to make sense, because I'm thinking, yeah, maybe I don't want to see like maybe I don't want to be recruited in that way. Maybe I don't want to see that kind of a post. Maybe that isn't going to make me want to sign up for this. And if I start to put myself in that position of what would I do? What would I want to see? If I'm following an organizational account on social media in some way, what account is it? Do I have, in my own personal life, do I have anybody on Instagram that's organizational, like for my own personal self? If so, what are the things that they're doing that I like? If we start from that place of some of this more intuitive, or not necessarily intuitive, we have to actually, you know, make a concerted effort to think about these things. But a lot of it is paying attention to the stuff in around us that is interesting and convincing, information that we hear that's not related to anything that we know, but that we end up going and sharing it at a dinner party. What is the nature of that information that made it interesting to you? Yeah, just that attention, I guess. Which is also something, because I have such a strong design background, there's that's a big part of progressing in design, is that paying attention.
Thank you again, Taylor.
My pleasure.